It's that time again where we get to watch another video where another person is complaining about how they're a victim of everything, how everything is racist, how everything is sexist, and how everything is some sort of phobia. But as I usually say, I am not going to talk anymore, so let us get into the video.
Time now for our big debate this morning. Bristol Museum has revealed plans to become the permanent home for the Edward Colston statue. You remember that one, toppled and pushed into Bristol Harbour during the UK's Black Lives Matter protests. A vote will take place today to decide whether the statue of the 17th century slave trader will go on display in Bristol's M Shed Museum permanently. Let's get more, should we? Iman Aiton from Black Lives Matter and Rafe Heidel-Manku. Thank you both for joining us on the programme. Away you go.
Now being put into a museum. It's a very good thing. Why? Because it's a British
all right, well,
artifact.
let me come in. All right.
For British museums, British.
Look, I'm not here to defend Colston, right?
Okay.
I mean, you know, the BLM agitators have tarnished and traduced the reputations of many great figures, from Churchill to Nelson to David Hume. One second, please let me have my chance, my dear. You know, and I'll always defend those characters. But Colston has got a very dark record when it comes to slavery, and so no one will defend that, even though, of course, he does have also a philanthropic side. People are complicated. History is complicated. My issue is with the toppling of the statue and the way in which it was toppled, with the frenzied baying mob attacking it in scenes reminiscent of the villagers going after Frankenstein with pitchforks and flaming torches, or even, you know, like the Taliban and ISIS attacking monuments and sculptures that they found offensive. And of course, there's a good deal of comparison there because, of course, like the Taliban, BLM and others want to try to erase our history, ban our books, decolonize our curriculums, police our speech. These are sort of year zero cultures which are very damaging to British identity and the sense of nationhood in this country.
What doesn't make sense to me is how these people just really complain about everything. They don't even take actions to do anything or better themselves. The same people who will complain about racism and everything is oppressive towards them are the same people who promote degeneracy in society. These same people will be the ones twerking and doing all sorts of other degenerate acts, but then they'll be the ones complaining about racism and people are stereotyping us. Stereotypes come from somewhere. With all the complaining that these people do, you would think they would move to another country, but they never seem to do that. They just complain and, as per usual, always want handouts.
All of this happened without public consent. We know from polling that only 13% of the public agreed with the manner in which this statue was toppled, even though 40% agreed with the statue being taken away. And of course, you also have to ask, what is the connection here? I would like to see the statue actually re-erected where it was, with all of the graffiti staying on it, all the vandalism there, to stand as a monument to a moment of national hysteria when the nation was gripped by a mass psychosis because of the death of somebody in another continent. George Floyd had nothing to do with the British story. His death had no relevance over here. But because of American culture and BLM agitators, the grievances of America were brought over here when we don't have anything like the race issues that America has. And it was a shameful moment in our history. And I think that's why the statue should go back to where it was.
Well, I do apologise for interrupting earlier. We do tend to get impassioned with these typical debates, Rafe. But I did want to say that 80% of Bristol wanted that statue removed. And like I said, I do have to reiterate the point. For over 100 years, it's been spoken about and criticised. So over 100 years, this has been an issue and they have been ignored. So that's really crucial in understanding the context. So I understand and I appreciate the fact that you've spoken about balance and the fact that he is a good and bad person. We agree on that point, which is always a nice thing to be able to do during a debate.
Do you agree he was a good guy as well?
Of course, balance, right? And this is what I wanted to kind of lead on to in terms of the BLM movement and all of these different EDI initiatives. It's about injecting balance into the conversation, injecting that balance that has been ignored. So that's really important. And then we also have to touch on the fact that the Colston Four were obviously let off. They weren't charged. And so that's another salient point that we have to introduce when we talk about damage and the fact that you saw these kind of this mob attacking this statue. Well, let's be fair in terms of damage, several things.
Before we get back into the video, I need everyone to turn on their post notifications so that you get notified whenever one of my videos come out. Like the video as much as possible, subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter at YinkaThatGuy. Let us get back into the video.
One was the fact that a really good argument was used. Apparently an art dealer valued the statue at 6,000 originally. And then after it was toppled, it went from 6,000 to 150,000 to potentially 300,000. This argument, can I just finish?
Well,
let me finish, please. Thank you. And this argument was actually used in court, and it worked. So
but that's
a really
hold on. We're talking about history.
Hold on. No, that was actually validated. That was actually validated. So it's. But well, can I finish, please? Can I finish, please? Secondly, so that was validated. That's a salient point. And then in terms of just kind of understanding that we're not actually trying to eradicate history, I've already mentioned balance, but I really think it's important that if people are so concerned about a statue of a slave trader who advocated for the torture, rape and murder of black people, and that's, can I finish, please? If that is at the heart of British culture, identity and the essence of being British, then one, that explains why we are still contending with racism 400 years later. That makes so much sense now. And of course, I do.
She cannot be serious to say that we are still contending with racism 400 years later. That is a load of lies and absolute rubbish. I keep saying this in all my videos, but for some reason, some of the black community believe that racism is an exclusive thing to them. Every race on this planet has experienced racism, and the fact that she still thinks it's alive the way it was 400 years ago is absolute stupidity. I'm sure if she was living in those times, she would say it's totally different to what it is now, and the people who actually experienced it back then would say that black people of now have their lives very good. But of course, people love to be victims, and people in today's economy and world get rewarded for being victims, so they continue to push the wheel of victimhood upon everyone and tell everyone that you're a victim. Tell black people that when they're born, they're going to be oppressed. Tell them that there's going to be racism towards them, instead of telling them that they should become victors and they should be able to go through life and work hard, and you'll get the things that you want out of life once you work hard. But instead, they just complain and say that they're oppressed. Because after all, it's easy to do that. It's easy to complain about everything. It's easy to say that you're a victim of everything. That's not a hard thing to do. The reason majority of people adopt this ideology is because it's an easy thing to do. Where you see a majority of people doing something, just know that's more than likely because it's easy to do.
I implore the British public to find somewhere else to get their self-esteem, with all due respect, as we now live in an inclusive environment. I'll leave it at that.
The public square is for everybody, and BLM do not have the right to take down statues without public consent. There was no vote for it. There was no decision about any of this, and that's what's the thing here. And if you expunge all of the bad elements from the public square, there'll be no reminders, for example, of slavery. People need to have in their daily lives a reminder of the good and the bad of society, and nothing in this world is binary either. And you talk about balance. Balance is actually very important. Why on earth would BLM suddenly attack the statue of a 17th century slave trader? If you're genuinely concerned about black lives, you'll be protesting the fact that 7 in every 1,000 Africans today is living in slavery. 10 million people. So where would the protest?
The reason they don't complain about that is because it doesn't go with their agenda. It doesn't follow the narrative of what's going on right now. It's very interesting, and it's a good point that he brought up, that they don't complain about the slavery that's still going on in Africa till this day. They complain from the comfort of their home while they're on social media, posting and roaming the streets, while they have food and money to live, while others are actually really suffering, and they complain from the comfort of their couches is really all it is. They're not victims. They're just people who make it all up in their head to just try and feel some sort of importance in society.
Today is living in slavery. 10 million people. So where were the protests? Where were the protests outside the Nigerian High Commission? Where were the protests outside the embassies of Sudan and Chad? Exactly. Let me finish, please, and go on. And also, it's also the hypocrisy here, because the same people who are calling for Coulson statue to be toppled are the same ones celebrating and revering the Benin bronzes, for example. The Benin bronzes were commissioned by and commemorate African slave owners, the most brutal slave owners in the world, and yet somehow those are to be celebrated, whereas Coulson has to be demolished. And we had that film The Woman King out recently, another film celebrated by BLM, yet that celebrates the warriors of the Dahomey Kingdom, the most brutal slave-owning state in the world history, which not only captured and enslaved fellow Africans to sell to Europeans, but held even more slaves to serve themselves on their own plantations in Africa, and then had brutal human sacrifices of tens of thousands of people. Every year the sacrifice would go on. and somehow this is all forgotten about. And it's only Britain that has to somehow apologise for slavery, and that, I think, shows the lack of balance here.
Because when it truly comes down to it, it just really shows that they don't care about anything other than themselves, and they're not really victims of anything, because when it comes down to the nitty-gritty of things, and just like he rightfully pointed out, that there are atrocities going on in Africa right now to their so-called people, they don't protest about it. They protest from the comfort of their home, where they can post and be fine once they wake up the next day. That's what they do. They're not really victims. They're just complainers of everything and try to make issues of everything is all they really are. But anyway, that was another video, another reaction. As I usually say, if you guys enjoyed the video, like the video as much as possible, comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter/X at YinkaThatGuy, and I'm out.